everyone's perception of what pro ball is going to be is wrong. Like you just, once you get in and live it, you're going to see, man, this is a lot different. They don't just get to go and play baseball all the time. There's a lot of other stuff that has to come in, and they've got to handle their business.
Okay, guys, these episodes still drop even when I'm on the road, so apologies for the backdrop. I'm not in my office, but I wanted to get you today's episode. So today's guest is with Alec Zumwalt, or Zoom, how he's known throughout the game. He is the Major League hitting coach for the Kansas City Royals. Alec was also a player and at one point played both professionally as a hitter and as a pitcher. When his playing career got done, he became an advanced scout with the Royals before he ultimately moved into the front office where he ran player development. He not only is involved in the game on the field, but he's a father to a few boys who also play travel baseball. So in his words, he's living it right alongside with you. In this episode, we cover the challenges he's faced as a parent and how his team, the Zumwalt family, are one unit. He talks about how important his wife Kristen is to their family's ultimate success. And we speak specifically about all things hitting, from what separates a big league hitter from the rest. What does he do specifically before games to get these players ultimately prepared for the game? The one approach he's only ever preached. He talks about the drill that Bobby Witt Jr. has done since he was a kid. And then what Josh Donaldson told him about hitting, that in his words was absolutely genius. Guys, this is an episode that you do not want to miss. All right, enough blabbering. Let's get on with the show. So I am joined by Alec Zumwalt, who, as people here on the podcast, I refer to as Zoom. So let's get this thing going, buddy. So Zoom is a big league hitting coach with the Kansas City Royals. Before that, you had quite the interesting, coming out party in pro ball. You were drafted out of high school, right? You were a pitcher and a hitter. I was fortunate enough to represent you at some point in your career, and I've known you for, it feels like 20 years about now. But I've seen, even when you got done playing, your transition into pro ball, and correct me if I'm wrong, but first started out as a pro scout. Correct. With the Royals. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. I was out of the game when I finished playing, I was out of the game for 3+ years, and kind of got my feet wet in amateur baseball. My boys were really young at the time, and so I was trying to figure out how to navigate that. And I was the assistant director at North Carolina Baseball Academy, and was lucky enough to be mentored by Scott Bankhead, who was one of my closest friends and taught me a lot about life after baseball, helped me through that process. But yeah, it was about little over 3 years where I was going to school, working full time, trying to make ends meet. My wife doing pretty much the same thing. We had the boys were just little, and got hired, got a random call. I tried to get my resume out to everybody. I really wanted to manage. I really wanted to get into baseball and be a manager. Hitting coach was also up on the list, but the phone didn't ring for 3 years. And then kind of out of nowhere, a mutual friend had reached out to some people with the Royals, and kind of like, hey, where you at? What are you doing? Living in central North Carolina was great for minor league baseball, and basically got the job because of where I lived and how many teams I could cover and drive and not have to fly. So first year getting into pro scouting was drinking from a fire hose, but thankful that I got to be around some old grumpy scouts that taught me the ways and taught me more than I could ever be, truly taught in a school or any type of setting, just sitting at games with conversations with these guys that have seen thousands upon thousands of players in their life. But yeah, then, kind of moved in. It's been a weird ride, man. Did the advanced scout for the Major League Club from 2012 until 2017. And then 2017, I transitioned into player development, went into the office full time, doing farm director duties for 3+ years, and then had to change all the hitting. We had to change our hitting in 2019. And I've been up to my eyeballs in hitting ever since. So, been in the major leagues the last couple of years and really it's a weird ride, man. People don't believe me that this is how my story is, but definitely not normal.
Well, what's interesting too, Zoom, having known you all these years, I think so many players get caught up in there's this vision of what they think their career is going to look like. And things get thrown at you and you have to adapt and you have to change and you have to make concessions and you have to make decisions that are hard decisions. But if you look at obviously where you kind of come and now where you are today, having, again, gone from the player role to the scouting role to in the front office, and then now being thrust into the major league hitting role with the Royals. I would assume that what you've gone through has pretty much prepared you probably perfectly for the role that you have now. But if you could, and here's the thing too, you mentioned your boys. So you obviously have 3 boys.
Four boys.
Oh, 4 boys. I'm sorry, 4 boys.
And 2 girls. So.
Right. And so for everybody who's listening, you're wondering, how is this possible that this man does what he does and then has this many kids? I have the same question. I don't know. But I guess the thing that I want people to kind of hear, though, is with all of your experience in the game of baseball, you have boys who play baseball. Even in your world today, like, it's still an overwhelming thing helping your boys currently who are playing in the travel baseball circuit. Like, I think parents would assume, oh, if you have all that info, Zoom, your situation is probably easy. You're probably just guiding them through it and it's a piece of cake. You know exactly what you need to do. And, share with them a little bit about how still overwhelming it can be given the current nature of, travel baseball. Talk a little bit about how hard that is, even with your expertise.
Well, first and foremost, I couldn't do any of this without my wife. I mean, Chris has been by my side since, I was an A-ball, like it's been a long journey for her as well, but she's been right there with me the whole time. And what she has to do with me being gone and with my schedule and getting kids to games all over Kansas City, which is our, now where we live the last 5+ years. And we've managed to pick the wrong side of town to play because we're like an hour from most parks. And it's just, it's a grind. I mean, she's put, I don't know how many thousands of miles on her car, just trying to get the kids back and forth to practice and games. But I think, one thing that really is hard for me, Matt, is that, there's the assumption that I've got all the answers and you probably just pick up the phone and get something done for your kid. I've never played that game and I'm never going to. Just graduated our oldest. And you know what? His journey is his journey. I mean, I tried to put him in the best position, get him on a team where he could play and be competitive and do all the things that he could do. But I'm not that dad that's going to be, hey, well, just because I work in baseball, I'm not pulling strings, which I think people sometimes assume. The other thing too is I'm just like everybody else. We're trying to get our kids to play on good teams and go play in good competitions. But we also have the pull of this industry, if you will, that, you got to play at this event. You got to go to that event. You got to with our boys, with 4 boys, it's a small fortune to run our team. That's the way I look at it. It's our team, Team Zumwalt. This summer, my wife is going to spend more time in Atlanta than she's going to spend in Kansas City, and we're a baseball family, but I think that, the industry has really pushed people. Everyone's it's like a herd, basically. They're leading the way and everyone just has to keep following. And I know for my oldest, because I didn't put him in, quote unquote, the biggest events or sign him up for all these, the emails that I get every single day for all these events all over the country year round. He probably didn't get as much exposure as a lot of his teammates. But frankly, I can't afford, sending any of them, $1,000 for this and $1,000 for that. We're a working family too. And we don't have the means to just send them to every event, which I disagree with anyways, because I think that, there's so much more training that needs to take place, down to like my 11-year-old and him worrying about what he's getting graded at in a competition, at a baseball tournament at 11. I mean, I got to remind him, hey man, when I was 11, I was 4'10" and about 80 pounds. So you're going to be okay. It's, don't worry about this stuff. And, and on the other side of it too, with my 2 oldest boys, they're tall. I mean, 6'5" and 6'6", and they've always been tall. But the first time they went to an event and got graded out, it's like those numbers stay with them. It's like, yeah, but these are the goofiest 13 and 14-year-old kids you've ever seen. I mean, they're baby deer trying to walk half the time, and they're getting graded against kids that are more physically mature than them. And I just swear I struggle with the amateur game, where it is right now, is because you're not a finished product. And until I don't think I ever became a finished product. And I think that a lot of guys would agree with that. I played 10 years in the minor leagues and I still felt like I was getting better. I still, at 30 years old, I felt like I was doing things the right way that I wasn't doing when I was 20. So these kids are, and I know with the college stuff, we can't fight it, but with my oldest going through it, where kids at 14 were committing to colleges, I just think it's not been great for the game, in my opinion.
No, I don't disagree. I mean, look, you've seen it all. I've obviously spent the last 20 plus years as an agent, so I've certainly seen my fair share of, the transition of amateur baseball has been one that is, there's been a lot of good that has come from it, but I think there is a lot of bad. And hey, look, it's one of the reasons for this podcast, right? Like wanting to help these parents navigate through this world that is so overwhelming. But I think it's a good thing for these people to hear, is like someone like you who does have all this expertise and all this experience. Even for you, it can feel overwhelming. But I think you did share one thing that I do find important, which is, even if you had all the means and even if you had all the resources, one of your sons, for example, is still just 11 years old, and he's going to need to grow and develop and mature. And knowing what you know about the game, knowing what I know about the game, if he can do that, he's going to put himself in a great position regardless of the circumstances. I mean, I had Alex McClure on this podcast, who's a West Coast cross-checker for the Tigers. And he's somebody who talks a lot about, I mean, look, if you're good enough, if your son is good enough, this industry, the scouting community is built to find you, right? Mm-hmm. I think somewhere along the way, and I think, it's the Perfect Games of the world, it's the PBRs of the world. These organizations are built to generate revenue. There's a lot of good that they do, but they're still trying to garner this level of, fear of missing out, so to speak, if you don't go to every single one of their events. It's why they have the ranking system the way that they do. And even with all the good that they do, obviously it can have some negative consequences to families who feel like they just need to kind of chase that carrot constantly. So I look, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here. I think you offer a really interesting perspective as a parent, but also as a major league hitting coach for the Kansas City Royals. So as everybody can see, you're obviously in a hotel room. You guys are in Minnesota currently. Talk to me a little bit about, the role of a hitting coach in the big leagues. I have a lot of questions just as far as kind of what you do for players. Obviously there's the manager, there's the bench coach, there's the hitting coach, the pitching coach, but talk to us a little bit about what your role is, and how you kind of see yourself being the most valuable to an organization.
Well, I think it's funny because I find myself constantly kind of going back to those 3 years where I was out of the game and I was doing lessons and I was running the academy. I was helping coach teams. I mean, it was a good time for me. It was a very dark time as well, just because transitioning out of the game is not easy for anybody. But doing all those lessons, getting hands-on with kids, seeing them succeed was something that was just in me that I just absolutely love. I love coaching. We did this exercise a couple of springs ago where Erman came in and was telling us, hey, why do you coach? Why do you coach? Why do you coach? And you just do this exercise where you keep answering, why do you coach? I love coaching. I love coaching in every aspect. And I think, again, referencing those times working with young kids and just getting kids to make contact with a baseball, like that was a big deal, right? But I got engulfed in the swing. I got engulfed in mechanics. I really was, we didn't have the social media yet in 2000. This would have been 2009 to 2011 kind of area. I fell in love with the digging deep and video and just all this stuff when it came to like the swing, because I felt like maybe some things I wish I had learned, I was actually learning with teaching kids, if that makes sense. So now being in the major league dugout, it's a way different process. It's a lot. It's our day is kind of chaotic. Yesterday, a day game, we were at the field right away, first thing in the morning, trying to get all the information printed off from the analytics department that we have, all of our scouting reports that we're putting together on our own. And then guys are trying to get in and get their work in and get ready for a game, all in one cage too. You think of major leagues, you think, oh, they got 10 cages for these guys to get ready. And here we are on the road. We got one cage to get, 13 guys their work in before a game. But yeah, there's a lot of work that I'm doing now that I think from my advanced scouting has really helped me, because I was breaking down the teams, giving that information to the major league staff for those years. Anything I could find to try to help us win a ball game, that's what I was doing. Still doing the same thing. I'm just so focused on the opposing pitchers. But with all the information that we have now at our fingertips, there's still that element of I'm still trying to like make this simple and make it watered down a little bit, because not all 13 guys want all the information on tonight's starting pitcher. It's different. I would say, what people probably assume the major league hitting coach job is not even close, because I think it's evolved so much in the last probably 8 to 10 years, just given all the analytics and what we have now. The video that we have at our fingertips. I mean, we've got 16 different camera angles that we can work on from any game. When I was scouting, I had the game feed. Basically, you could watch the game on MLB and you'd have to slide it over and deal with commercials and all that. You couldn't really slow it down, versus now we have just so much technology at our fingertips. So, and it just doesn't stop either. I mean, before, when you texted me this morning, I'm working on San Diego, which is our next series. So we're in game 2 of a 4-game series against Minnesota, and I'm 4 days ahead. I mean, that's how you have to go. But I'm thankful in the situation that I've got Keone Duren's our assistant hitting coach. Joe Dillon is also our assistant hitting coach. And we have Miguel Garcia, who also helps as an assistant hitting coach. So it's really a 4-man job. I really believe that, again, it's just, you guys kind of gravitate to certain people. We're all on the same page. We may say things a little bit differently. We do that intentionally so that, that's the art of coaching. You got to get guys. Sometimes it has to be their idea. Sometimes, me saying a word just throws them off, and Joe can say something that's different, but we're technically saying the same thing. That's just, I think, the part of it. There's a lot of, they're still they're major league hitters. They're really good, but this game is still so mental. And up here with the pressures of being in a major league game every night, like, some of the conversations that you have with guys are conversations that I would have with my 11-year-old. It's kind of funny. But I think that just, being able to coach my kids on my own, not necessarily as a team, but just working with them over the years, and the time that I did have those 3 years out of the game to really just get an understanding of maybe where a lot of amateur players are coming from. And then in pro ball, I didn't have the experience of being in the dugout per se in the minor leagues, but 2020, the shutdown, we had the alternate site in Kansas City, and it was me, JJ Piccolo, Mitch Meyer, Keone, Drew Saylor, Scott Thorman, and then the pitching coaches. We basically ran, we coached our alternate site team for that year in 2020. And then going into 21, 19 was kind of similar too, because I was in the dugout. I was helping the players. I was coaching. I was really diving in, also having to wear the khaki pants and be in the office, which was great because the guys made fun of me. And that was a really easy connection, for them to. I think it was good because I bridged that gap. It wasn't, oh, he's the guy that sits up in the tower kind of deal. It was, he's one of us, and I think that was one of the brilliant things that JJ did for our entire organization was he got in uniform along with me. And, that's the players that we were coaching at that time is the core of the group that we have up here right now. So I love coaching, Matt. I really do. And like I said, when I got done playing, I really wanted to get into coaching, and obviously God had a bigger plan for me of why I didn't get right into coaching right away, and why I didn't truthfully get into being in uniform until, just a few years ago. But this is hard. It's not easy. I mean, we're having, we're playing well right now, and that's good, but you still have guys that are struggling, so you every day you come in and it's something different, like I said, trying to prepare for, the starter that we're going to face tonight, and then kind of pick out what we think the bullpen's going to look like. And, hey, you need to get your work in. We need to let's go get some machine work in. And guys are coming in with their ideas too. And I'm open to that. I always want them to bring their ideas and have their thoughts. Because again, where I learned with hitting, there's not one way. There's not just one simple way. It's the hardest thing to do in all of sports. I believe that with all my heart. And so you got to be open.
Well, and I think that what you've gone through, the journey has prepared you in a really great way for your role now. Being on my side, I've had these conversations that are intimate conversations with players, and they oftentimes describe, what makes a good hitting coach. And it's funny because it is different from player to player. But a lot of times players will say, a good hitting coach is one who watches me and over time figures out what it is that I need to hear. And obviously you have to offer your own perspective, but sometimes when they, if you take the inverse of that, like what makes a bad hitting coach, it's somebody who every individual at bat is constantly chirping a different thing. Hey, try this. And it just becomes so overwhelming. And so, part of, I think your role is talking to players about kind of what their approach is. And I think these players who are amateurs or even in the minor leagues oftentimes hear this word approach. Give me your perspective on what is an approach, and how do you help determine with these players, like what is the right approach given the circumstances, given the situation? How is that developed?
That's a really good question, Matt. I think approach is one of those things that's not coached, at least in what I've experienced. It's not coached well in the amateur game, because I still think there's the element of an old school approach of, whatever it may be, I'm just going to hit everything to right field, or I'm going to pull, there's all the different areas there. But I'm just think there's some people that maybe haven't understood that approach for me is always going to be dictated on who the pitcher is, because that tells you what you're trying to do right there. I mean, we were facing Joe Ryan yesterday, and he's throwing, he's thrown from 4'10", and his ball is going straight up. And, we tried to do everything we could to get on top of that ball. So the approach of Joe Ryan is going to be completely different than a guy that's throwing a two-seamer and it's throwing a sinker. So our approach at the major league level is obviously something that has to change daily. And each hitter has their own approach, but we try to give them a general idea of, hey, this is what you need to do. But I think in the amateur game, the mechanics become the crutch of why you didn't succeed, when in reality, it might not have been that. Because, I can think of a lot of times, and Salvador Perez is a great example for us. He won the wild card game on a mechanically not great swing on a pitch that's in the other batter's box, but he found a way to make contact and give ourselves, a chance to win that game. His approach, obviously is, and right now he's had some of the best at bats I've ever seen him have, but his approach has continued to change at 34 years old. Like, he's just continued to get better. But when you look back to, a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old, and you ask them, what's your approach right here? You're probably going to get a million different answers that have nothing to do with hitting, from a standpoint of good hitting, I'll say, and if it's coached to them from some guy that's giving them lessons or whatnot, I'm always going to ask that question of, like, well, do you get to go see his at bats? Like, you just come for a lesson and I tell you what your swing needs to do. Like, that's great. But when the ball's traveling at you and you don't know if it's going to be a fastball or a slider or whatever, mechanics are going to break down a little bit. And what's my approach right here? Well, did you pay attention when you were on deck that he threw 3 changeups and warmups and all of them bounced and they didn't even make it to the plate? That's where I think some of the conversations need to start with the younger kids about approaches. You guys sit here on the bench and you're watching the other team's pitcher throw. And, like I've always said, when my kids have gone to these big events and whatnot, I just say, hey, that they're just trying to throw as hard as they can because they see the radar guns back there. Did you pay attention to his breaking ball? When you swung at that breaking ball that bounced, did you not see that he threw 3 of them in warmups that did the same? So I think getting kids to start thinking about what the pitcher is actually doing can help them build an approach. But, for me, like the only approach that I've ever preached that I will stay consistent with is we're trying to hit hard line drives. That's your approach. I want to try to get a good pitch to hit and hit hard line drives. If we're doing that, we're probably swinging at good pitches, which means we're not chasing. We're going to be, our mindset can't change because we have 2 strikes. We can't. I don't believe in a 2-strike approach that works for everyone. I think some guys choking up works, right? Some guys whiting out works. The old school mindset, I'm just trying to make contact, whatever. But some guys don't. Some guys need to just say, hey, I got to stay the same right here. I got to think that this is a 2-1 pitch instead. I don't want to expand or whatever it is. But I think approach, that's a dicey one, Matt. It really is. And I think I would always challenge younger hitters. Hey, look, I get it, man. Work on your mechanics. You got to have good timing, because when you're off time, your mechanics break down. You can't have that crutch all the time to fall back on. Well, my mechanics broke down. Yeah, but what were you trying to do right there? Because if you don't have an approach, you're making it that much easier for the pitcher to get you out.
Well, what's interesting too is, like, so you watch these young kids, right? 11, 12 years old. And chances are if they have an approach, it's something like you said, like, oh, go the other way. And it seems to always be kind of the same thing, right? And even at that young age, my assumption is their mechanics probably aren't great, but they're capable of getting results still, even at that age. Mm-hmm. And so I think as you bring up the mechanics of a swing, sometimes, like, I agree with you. I think it is a crutch for players where they try to create perfection and they think that they can duplicate this perfect swing at all times. And the more likely they are to duplicate a perfect swing, the more success they're going to have. And it's hard because in baseball, a game of failure, chances are that is not going to happen. Right. And so that's where I think mechanics and approach, they're different, they go together as far as like how they keep this thing strong. Like if you can build a strong foundation, which I do believe is good mechanics and also a good approach, you can ultimately have a lot of success. But you have to be comfortable knowing, hey, these things aren't going to be perfect every single time you go up to the plate. And you still have to find a way how to help your team win day in and day out.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. But with younger players too, like if your approach is just to hit the ball the other way all the time, like you're going to start creating and manipulating mechanics that, again, as you get older, they're going to be harder to fix. I firmly believe at the young age, try to get the kids to use the entire field. We're going to our focus is going to be middle. Like we're going to try to hit the ball middle, because if you're a little late, you still have room. If you're a little bit ahead, you still have room to keep the ball in play. If we start shifting the field too far one way to the other, I really struggle with that, because I feel like there are some things that are really hard to fix as a kid, as a young hitter gets older. Because the old adage of old habits die hard, like that's real. I've always done this. I get it. I understand you've always done that, but you're facing stuff that we face up here. They're picking you apart. I mean, they've got the weapons to pick you apart. Younger players, and especially the high school age kids, I still think though that there needs to be more conversation about approach, because like you said, we're not going to get, a perfect mechanical swing. I always say, okay, what pitch does that happen on? Oh, this one right down the middle. Oh, how many of those do you actually really get? Like you got to be able to cover a lot more real estate in that strike zone than just the one down the middle. And again, that's why I challenge. I'm big on challenge BP. I still throw as an old man. I'm still trying to strike guys out in the cage. I mean, literally every day. That's a couple of our guys' routine right before we go in the game. I try to throw the exact whatever that guy's throwing today, I'm going to throw it. I'm going to try to spin the ball the same. And if we can't, we set the machine up with TrackMan. We use TrackMan to make our pitches as nasty as possible, but what the guy's going to throw. Because I feel like, again, you said it, the game's so hard, right? Perfection doesn't make any sense in this game because you just fail all the time. So if you're not ever challenging yourself in your batting practice, and it's always feel good batting practice, man, you're hurting yourself. That's my belief. You have to challenge yourself so that you get better and you go, okay, like if anything, this should be harder. I want this to be harder in the cage. Then when I go out in the game, it feels easier, even though we know it's not. So I really believe that's one of those things that is not coached in amateur baseball. And it's hard because sometimes you got one guy trying to get all the hitters through the cage before a game and whatnot. You don't have that luxury to do that. I get it. But on their own, if hitters want to be really good, that would be my advice to younger hitters. If you want to really be good, you need to get challenged more. You need to hit off velocity. You need to face nasty breaking balls in the machine. They've got all these balls now that are soft, so you don't break your hands when you miss hit one. You don't break your bat when you miss hit one. Your brain has got to train against velocity and break. Again, because the pitching has gotten nastier and nastier, and they're going to keep going. They're going to keep making it nasty.
Yeah, that's great advice, because that was my next question actually are there, walk us through maybe a cage routine that you'll do with your guys. And I understand it changes obviously, but is there some consistency with, these, 1, 2, or 3 different things are the things that we kind of start with in our cage work and then it progresses? What would you say as far as?
I think, one that stands out to me, it's funny, but Bobby Witt Jr. Years ago when we were talking, when he was still in the minor leagues, and we were talking through some stuff, and he was going kind of through a rough stretch. And I said, what did you and your dad always do? Like, what is one of those things that you guys always did? Well, side toss. Well, you never do side toss. Well, yeah, but we just don't do it in pro ball. Well, why not? You can do whatever you want, man. Like this is your cage routine. So he does his side toss every day, just like he did probably all the way back to when he was 8, 9 years old with his dad.
Interesting.
It's one of those things, and that my dad did side toss with me, and because we just had a net, I didn't have a cage. So, I get it. If that's just, I always think you got to kind of reference back to something that helps you feel like you're getting going. It's a good starting point. We have some guys that still start off on the tee, just get their swing going. I'm a big believer though, that you've got so many swings in a day. So you really need to, if you're using a tee as a warm up, I think there's other options, but I get it. Some guys like to do tee.
Like what though? What are some other options?
Well, med ball routines. There's a lot of stuff that our strength and conditioning departments put together with bands. I think just wasting swings, Matt, really, I struggle with that. I went down this rabbit hole a couple years ago when guys were getting obliques, trying to figure out why. Certain people were telling me that we let them swing too much. Other people were on my side of the fence where I said, I don't think they swing enough. I don't think they understand how many swings they need to have. But I did come back to my belief with our sports science department was that guys were going easy, and then trying to go max effort. And that was a big source of why we had some oblique issues. So I just think there's definitely ways to build up as opposed to just trying to go easy and then full blast. But I think, there's got to be an element where you feel good, get some swings off. I don't love front toss because I just think the ball has a hump on it. That's not helping you. But if it's a part of your warm up, I get it. I like to do a lot of angle BP. So third base angle, first base angle, just to try to make it a little bit harder on the guys as opposed to just, caviar BP, as Mike Sweeney says, like just that
caviar.
I mean, BP, it's great. Everyone wants to hit and launch balls and whatnot, but again, is that really helping me be prepared for what I'm trying to do right now in the game? So but I just believe it's a process getting up as you get closer to game time. Guys come into the cage before the game. When we're at home, we have 2 cages, so it works out. Like I said, we have machines set up. If I'm going to throw live, that we'll do whatever we got to do, but there's not much easy stuff going on before the game. And I just feel like that's it's a process that I believe in. I just think that as you build up through the day, you're getting yourself up to speed with what you're going to face in the game. But again, I know that's the luxury that we have up here, and a lot of the amateur players don't get that luxury. But like I said, if you really want to be good, I think you have to find a routine that helps you get prepared, because when you have that 8 a.m. game in Jupiter and you're not going to have a chance to really get a lot of swings off, if you get any swings off, what can you do to help yourself be as prepared as possible? Because it happens. It's going to happen all summer. My kids this weekend, they're playing 8 a.m. games. And what I love is that they push each other, having the boys and we have a barn that we basically converted into our baseball facility, and they go out there and they feed the machine for each other. But I just think that if you want to be good at this, like, you've got to find what routine is really good for you. And again, if you ask, I always ask guys, why do you do that? Like I said, Bobby's answer was great. And as well, this is what me and my dad used to do. Great. Let's go. Let's do it. It worked. It obviously worked when you were an amateur. Let's keep going. But if a guy really doesn't give me a good answer, or he gives me an answer that somebody, whether it's a hitting guru or something they saw on Instagram, like, come on, man, that's not helping you. Like, let's try something different. That's where I have to be honest. Like, that's one thing about the hitting coach thing for me, is that I shoot them straight. I can't, even when they're struggling, like, I'm going to be your best cheerleader. But, look, bottom line is, were you on time? Did you swing at a good pitch? Then we can talk mechanics, because I think that ultimately it goes back to the approach stuff. But I think you got to answer those first 2 questions before we can start digging into mechanics. And is your cage routine helping you with the mechanics? Is it helping you with your approach? Because it's all got to kind of tie together.
Well, and I think you said something interesting, which is there is no perfect, I call it, recipe for having success. And I think, it may be like the Instagram hitting coach or the social media hitting coach. Everyone sees, I'll say Mookie Betts, for example. Oh, Mookie does this. And if I just duplicate exactly what he does, then I should have the same success, right? It's like modeling Mookie Betts. And I think there are things to take away from anything, but you need to analyze, does this work for me ultimately? And so even with the things that you're saying, it's like, try stuff out. See if it works. If it works, stick with it. If it doesn't, then let's keep searching for it. But there's no replication for experience. I think you're just ultimately going to have to put yourself into the fire and figure out, what is the thing that I find to be the most successful for me? I think what you bring up as far as their intention, though, is great, right? Work with intention. Why are you doing this? Yeah. Right? And be clear with that. Because if you don't know why you're doing it, if your answer is, well, because this guy told me to, you're not bought in. And then all you're going to do when you get to pro ball, if you're lucky enough, the minute someone says, try this thing new, you're going to try something new. And then you're constantly searching. So I think for all the amateur players, this is a great opportunity to start building the foundation like Bobby did, as you say, building that foundation that you ultimately can use and take it to the next level. But for guys that do go to the next level, obviously, let's just say a high school kid who gets to pro ball, Is there something that you've seen to be kind of like, this is the biggest adjustment that they ultimately need to make going from high school to pro ball? Is there something that stands out?
I'm always going to believe that just the velocity, just seeing the velocity that they're going to see daily. Yeah, you're a Jupiter, you might see 2 or 3 arms that are pretty good, right? You're seeing those guys in better every single day in pro ball. I think that's the biggest adjustment. I'm not going to go down the avenue of my career, but I promise you, in 1999, when I got to the Gulf Coast League and I was seeing 17-year-old Dominicans throwing upper 90s and didn't know where it was going, that was eye-opening for me, because coming from North Carolina, the hardest guy I faced in North Carolina was a guy named Ralph Roberts. I'll never forget it. He's one of my closest friends to this day, but he was throwing 88 miles an hour, and we thought he was the next thing, right? The summer before I got drafted, I got to face Josh Beckett a couple times, who was the hardest thrower in the country, and second pick in the draft or whatever. Or did he go first? It was Beckett and Josh Hamilton were first two guys. Hamilton was throwing 90, 95 off the bump then, and we thought that was just unbelievable. But like, that's every day now. You're not getting that once a week starter that is going to blow your doors off. You got it every single day. And like I said, I referenced Joe Ryan yesterday. He's throwing 96 mile an hour rise balls, basically. Where the hitters are coming back to the dugout saying, "Man, that started at my knees and it was above the zone when I swung at it." So I think just the stuff overall, seeing the stuff. And again, I got to experience Jupiter last year with my oldest son and seeing that craziness of what that the whole event is about. It was great. It was great. I saw good pitchers. I'm not going to say I didn't see good pitchers, but it's a whole nother level when you get into pro ball, what the arms are doing, especially as they keep getting up. I mean, you keep moving up and you get to double A. If you're lucky enough to get to double A, you're facing a dude every single day. You're not getting that back end guy like we used to, where it's like, oh, well, we got the number 5 today. No, that number 5 is still really good. So I think just the day to day and just the grind, man. Like, I know that guys go on these circuits and they play one game a day and they have a couple days off and then they go to the next event, and hey, pro ball is every day. It's every day. And then you start mixing in the travel, and the minor leagues have gotten so much better than they ever were when I was there, but it's still hard. They're still traveling. The Mondays off schedule is great, but you got the AAA guys, they're still having to get up and take the 6 a.m. flight to get back, and that's their off day. So I just think it's a different kind of grind. And you know what? The one thing that I've always thought about when being in pro ball for all these years now is the defense. You hit balls good, and they're getting caught. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's the other part of it. You're not getting the hits, that ground ball up the middle that, rolled through on the turf at Lake Point. Like, man, the guy's there. Bobby Witt's there to make that play. And, if you're in the minor leagues, it's some kid that is really good player. Like, you don't get to pro ball. I think that's the thing. I was not a big fan of them shrinking the minor leagues, but I get it. And I would say the playing field has gotten better because you've got such talented kids in pro ball that, it's just a little bit tighter. You're not getting some of the guys in there that were, from my generation and whatnot. But I think that, honestly, Matt, like, everyone's perception of what pro ball is going to be, whether you grew up in the game. I mean, you could talk about a Bobby or whatever, but like for the average kid, what their perception of pro ball is going to be is wrong. Like, you just, once you get in and live it, you're going to see, man, this is a lot different. This isn't just, they don't just get to go and play baseball all the time. There's a lot of other stuff that has to come in, and they've got to handle their business.
I asked a handful of younger kids. I let them know that I was going to be talking to you and speaking to you about hitting. And I said, hey, is there anything specific that you'd want to know from them? And so I have a couple questions that I want to ask. And I want to make that clear, because when I say these questions, you're going to be like, what? So what's a good overload and underload batting routine? And this guy in particular uses a pro velocity bat. And then he also uses Marv balls. But is there anything that jumps out as far as something that would be a good routine?
Yeah. So again, I have relied on our sports science department for years now, because they're way smarter than I am. But what we've found with the overload, underload routines, and I believe in them. My sons do it. That's how much I believe in them. But it's always +3. So 3 ounces heavier than your game bat, 3 ounces lighter than your game bat. So, good example, my 14-year-old, when in the off season, he started out with the heavier bat. He would do his rounds straight on and his angles with the heavy bat. So 3 rounds of heavy. Then we would do straight on with the light. And when we did the light bat, the goal was that he didn't feel like he was overswinging more than anything else. So I was trying to throw firm, but not too firm, for him to feel like he was firing his normal swing. And then when we went back to game bat, we only used the game bat against the machine, against velocity. So we were doing that every other day in the off season. And then once he started playing games, we narrowed that down a little bit, because again, what I teach, I preach. So what I'm telling the major league guys, I'm doing it with my own kids too, but we tailor down their routine as they get into playing games. Cause like I said, I just feel like you've got to be careful with the amount of swings, but depending on what I would ask the hitter what he's trying to accomplish with that. I think that, there's some gains there for bat speed, but when you start going too heavy, what we found was the mechanics changed. We were using the Edgertronic cameras to watch guys when they were swinging and with heavier bats, and same thing with the light. When it was too light, their mechanics changed. And so for me, if the ultimate goal is to make better quality contact, you can't go too far one way or the other and then kind of create a problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect sense. Yeah, that's valuable. What are some good drills for lower half separation? And he made it a point to say he's trying to create more kinetic energy starting with his lower half.
Okay. Well, it all starts with the floor. I mean, he's got to use the ground. So I would have to see him to see where he's at to kind of making, somewhat of a diagnosis and whatnot. But I do a lot of stuff where, again, focusing on the feet, because everything comes from the ground, and getting that energy and using that force. One of the most simple things that guys have always overlooked is their finish. So if he fires his swing and he hits a ball good and he's falling off balance, he's not using all that energy from the floor. So I would always challenge their work to be very meticulous about the feet. Start with the feet. Are your feet in a good position when you're making contact? What is his move doing to get his front foot into the ground? Because that's a big part where guys lose the energy. So from where he's loading into his back hip and then striding into his front, is he using the ground or is he falling off the ground? Is basically how I do it. But yeah, I always say finish your swing. That's one of my big beliefs. So hold to finish. If you can do that, you probably did some things really well from the ground. But if he's getting locked out too soon with his front leg, that's an issue. I always look at too, again, I would love to see this, but if he's swaying his load, so if he's swaying his weight back and then swaying back forward, basically then your energy is lateral and you're not getting anything from the ground. So very meticulous on that. I do like there's some med ball stuff that I could suggest for him to feel that separation a little bit more too. But yeah, that's where you got to start with the feet, man. And you brought up something, I want to address something too, because again, if not just this hitter in particular, but you drop the Mookie Betts thing and guys modeling their swings, guys got to be very careful, in my opinion, of trying to model themselves off guys that are like that. You know what I mean? Like, because I always ask, how do you move? Do you move like me?
Right. Their body moves. Exactly. Their body moves.
So that brings me up with this, because you're talking about separation. Well, he may get separation different, but he's trying to get it the way Mookie gets it. And, you start getting on Instagram and you start looking at some of that stuff. And the reality is, like, for me, I don't ever want to ask a player to do something that his body physically doesn't do well. Right. You can train some of that. You can help get the moves better, but how you move is unique to yourself. And so that's where some of these drills and whatnot, they have to find them. I get it. They've got to try to figure out if this works for me or not. But being hell bent to, like, I got to move like Mookie Betts, man, you're probably going to hurt yourself, because he's so elastic and he can do things that, I mean, for me, like, we have MJ Melendez who moves like that. I call him Gumby, because I mean, he can get so twisted up and he does things that, most guys can't do. So that's where you got to be careful with some of the drills, though. Is this going to help me or is this going to hurt me? With this kid in particular, if you want me to look at it and kind of help him out, because it's a tough one without seeing it, right? Because there will be some things there. But like I said, I think from the most simple place he could start is where are your feet at, and how is your move? How is your load using the ground? Bottom line, because if you get, like I said, if he's swaying, he's just lateral with his move, he's going to slide, and he's just not using all that energy from his backside.
Right. Now you talked about the lower half. I think one of the more recent things of interest that a lot of players talk about is the scissor, right? What is your thought on the scissor? Is it ever appropriate? Do you like it? Do you not like it? And I even asked the question recognizing, well, it depends, right? It depends on how the guy's body moves and everything. But do you have an opinion or a perperspective that you can offer on that?
I think that it kind of came and people were trying to teach it because they saw Mike Trout do it, or you saw, you saw Bobby Witt. Bobby Witt will do it occasionally, but it's one of those things that, like, I don't think you teach someone to move that way because that's not their natural move. I think it's a natural ability to buy yourself a little bit of time, and you're basically holding your front side a little bit longer, and it allows them to, do it. There was that swing the other night. I saw, I'm trying to think of, I'm drawing a blank on it right now, but someone naturally just got themselves out front, but they were able to hold themselves back and made contact through the middle. Like, it was one of those, not a pretty swing, but he held himself basically without the scissor. So that's where I kind of go back to this. If your body moves and you naturally scissor, okay, I get it. But if you don't, I saw a couple years ago, there were some people that were teaching it to, in my opinion, to players that had no business trying to scissor. Because now you start concentrating on a move that truthfully is going to hurt you in the long run because you're kind of robbing yourself from your naturalness.
Well, I think we've seen it, the first time I remember seeing this really big with social media was like Josh Donaldson, right? Josh Donaldson has a ton of success at the time. Everyone says, oh, the rubber band effect, the big leg kick, like everybody should do it. And you saw in amateur baseball, everybody started having this really massive leg kick. And then it became, there was the Mike Trout, and it's like Aaron Judge. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's starting to look like Aaron Judge. And so I think naturally it's what I think a lot of these online hitting coaches gravitate towards, because it's easy to say, let me show you film on Aaron Judge and you see how he does this. This works. Do this. And if you're Aaron Judge's hitting coach and you're the one that helped him create this, or you have taught him this, on some level, it allows you to sell what you do, and I can help you do this too, right? So I don't fault anybody for it, but I think it's on every player to be responsible enough to ask themselves, like you said, before Aaron Judge, was everybody doing Josh Donaldson? Was everybody doing Mike Trout? Was everybody doing Mookie Betts? So now, just because there's a new thing coming, it doesn't mean it's right for everybody. And you have to be responsible and analyze, like you said, how does my body work?
And that actually, it's crazy you brought it up. But so Josh Donaldson, during the 2020 shutdown, Andy LaRoche is friends with him. Andy's one of our hitting coaches, and we were doing weekly calls with all the hitters, and we had guest speakers. We were running a podcast basically kind of deal, because we were just trying to survive the 2020 shutdown. Well, we had Josh Donaldson come on and talk to our hitters, and he's still playing at the time and whatnot. But he said something that to me was absolutely genius, and I never heard anybody say it before. But someone was talking about his move and how big his move is. And he said, I control my move. I don't let my move control me. And that kind of just
interesting.
Okay, this guy just took me to a whole nother level right there, because he's mastering his move that he wasn't letting it get him out of control. So there's some genius in there, in my opinion. And I try to, like, over the years now with other hitters, I've kind of brought that back around. Hey, you remember when Josh Donaldson said that? You remember that? When you're not controlling your move right now, you're letting your moves control you. And so you're not going to succeed. So being that meticulous about your swing, I think, is great. Trying to be that meticulous to try to be Aaron Judge is probably not going to help. It's not going to work very well. Again, we're talking about a monster of a man. His moves can work a lot different than you or I. So I think that's the dangerous part of chasing the online coaches, if you will, the Instagram gurus, if you will. I don't think any of them are trying to do bad. I think genuinely they want to be good coaches and whatnot, but they're also marketing and their business, and they're trying to make money doing that. I think that's where it's different on our end as coaches, especially in the major leagues. We're trying to help you guys be championship players. I promise you this, and I've always said, I'm going to say it till I get whacked. I mean, that's the beauty of being a hitting coach in the major leagues. Not many of them stick around very long because it's a very hard job to hold. But I will say this, don't ever take credit for a player doing well, because you better be ready to take credit for every time they're not doing well, which is going to be way more, obviously you're going to be failing so much in this game. So, but relentless every single day to be there for them and help them. Like I said, I mean, ultimately that's the goal. We want to be raising a trophy at the end of the season. And, over the course of time too, obviously you want these guys to get their individual goals. So, but that's where the online hitting stuff and where we are right now, and especially probably with the younger kids, I think there's some danger there. There really is some danger with trying to replicate and trying to hit like a certain person because you saw it. I mean, like no one's ever hit like Barry Bonds ever. Right. I still haven't seen anybody hit like David Ortiz, Robinson Cano. Like you start talking about the great ones, like I'm sure there's been 1,000 people try to look like them and try to hit like them. But if your body doesn't move that way, you're just going to hurt yourself, I think.
Right. I think a lot of these amateur players look at big leaguers like they're so consistent, right? And I know one of the questions that I got was, what do you believe helps hitters at the big league level stay so consistent? I think I know the answer given what we've talked about today, but is there something that just jumps out at you that you would say answers that question?
I have not been around many guys that just roll into the cage nonchalant and just, all right, I'm going to go hit now and like go out to the game. Like they're meticulous. Like this is their profession.
This is their job.
Their
right?
job, yeah. And they do want to perfect it, and the good ones are very consistent with their routine. They're consistent with their work. But I think they're also very open and honest with themselves. And I always tell the guys that, like, you got to be honest with the mirror. Okay. You can't fool the mirror. So I'm not hitting sliders right now. What are you doing to work on sliders? Like, you just expect you're going to hit them? Like, are you doing anything to work on? Again, all the information we have up here is at their fingertips of where they're doing well, what they're doing damage on, what they're not doing damage on. Oh, and by the way, every single one of your opponents has that same information. Like, nothing's kept here anymore. Like 10 years ago, certain teams had analytics that other teams didn't have. Everyone has the same stuff now. It's how are you using it? And I think that's where the good major league hitters are just going to stay as consistent as possible. Working with Salvador Perez these last few years, man, the guy's a machine. He's the first one in the clubhouse. He takes care of his body in the training room before he even gets to the weight room to work out, then to get to the cage, does his routine. Very simple in what he's trying to do every single day. And then on top of that, he's having to prepare to help, the starting pitcher and call the game and do his catching work and everything else. Like his day is not him hanging out. And I think, with him being our most veteran player, like that's a really good example to follow. But, with all of our guys, I'm really thankful for the group that we have, because they all are very meticulous when they come in. And, like some of them just need a pat on the butt some days too. And like, hey man, you can be all right. You hit some balls hard yesterday. You swung good pitches. Like you got to be relentless and staying the course, because this game will chew you up. If you're every day you're coming in with something new and you're just all, I got to do this, I got to do that, man, you're going to just get chewed up. But you've got to be relentless and being consistent, but you also have to be relentless with working on the things you need to work on that you're not doing so well. Everyone wants to, just like I said, that groove BP, the caviar, Mike Sweeney style, like you want it, like that's good. And sometimes you do need that just to kind of feel good with your stuff. But consistency to me is key, of how I'm going. And again, they got to take care of themselves off the field. They got to get their sleep. You got to eat right. You got to do all the other things. Your body's a machine. So whatever you're putting in, I mean, you're going to get it on the way out. You don't take care of yourself. Like I said, the daily grind and on this schedule, like those guys don't stick around very long.
Yeah. Austin Riley, I interviewed on here, and one of the things that he said that was really eye-opening, I think, given his level of success, he brought up the consistent routine with Matt Olson. He brought it up with Freddie Freeman. He brought it up with Ronald Acuna. And he said it's one of the things that he's continued to work on and focus on is when you're struggling, these guys they do not deviate from their routine, right? And I think a lot of guys at the younger or at the lower levels, even in amateur baseball especially, when they're struggling, it's like eject. I have to rewrite the script. Let me start over from scratch. This swing doesn't work. Let me now try something new. And these are perfect examples of guys who, granted, they've built to get to this place. They've built their foundation from the ground floor, and they have now something that obviously has worked at the highest level. But even when they struggle, it's don't deviate from the routine. Now, there are adjustments and changes that you obviously have to make, but it's not scrapping the whole thing and then starting over. Right. And again, a guy like Austin Riley, who's been top 10 in MVP voting a couple times, a few-time All-Star, Silver Slugger winner, all MVP, all MLB, like he's done a lot of things in this game. Even he can assess his game and say, man, I could get better at that. And, like I think about your guys, you have a 162 game schedule, right? People want to know how difficult it is to be a big league hitting coach. Like, it's your job to prepare these hitters for 162 games. I can't imagine that's easy.
Like I said, I love it. I love it. I don't know anything else. Like, I love it. But I will say that's what Austin Riley's saying is absolutely correct. But I feel like, from my own experience, sometimes when we're chasing all these other things, we miss the simple that's right in front of us. Hey, man, like, did you not, like, you started late? Like, timing is timing is the key element to hitting, right? And the pitcher's goal is to throw your timing off. Like, that's it. That's the reality. If you keep it that simple, it kind of is mind blowing. But so many times I look at it and I go back to, look, why you're chasing this with your move, or you're looking there with this and what. But the reality is, man, that pitcher was about to release and you hadn't even started to load yet. So you're not even giving yourself the chance to fire that swing off that you practice so much in the cage. So again, I just feel like when guys start to scuffle, and I see it with my own boys and amateur stuff, I constantly come back to simple. Hey, is your head moving? Did you see the ball hit the barrel? Like, did you kind of slow it down to that element? Because then again, we can start, once we get back to the very simple genius of this game of, like, I want to see the ball hit the barrel and I want to hit a hard line drive. Okay, get back to that. And now we can start to maybe peel back the layers a little bit. But I think when we just start throwing stuff in there every day and like, hey, I got to do this, I got to do that, or I had a bad at bat, now I got to change because this next at bat I got to get a hit. I feel like, and I know it's different in the amateur game, but just in pro ball, what I've learned as a coach, chasing hits is completely a waste of time for your performance. You've got to be relentless in your process. I've been asked before about, because hard hit data is one of those things I do believe in. And I've been criticized because, our team average wasn't good, or some guys were struggling, but we were hitting the ball hard, and that's a flawed approach. I don't think it's a flawed approach. The game is really hard. If you hit the ball hard, that means you're swinging at good pitches. You're making good decisions. That means you probably were firing off a pretty good mechanical swing. You had a good approach. All of those things are being checked. You do that over the course of 162 games consistently, and you're going to have good numbers at the end. I believe that. Now, chasing hits, guys just trying to find a way to get a hit, I just feel like then you take your process and you threw it in the trash. You're not even giving it a chance. So I just feel like for younger players, the more process driven they can become, they're setting themselves up for success. But coming in every day, if that's your process, well, I just got to get 4 hits today. Okay, good luck. Right. I think how are you gonna accomplish that? That kind of goes back to why. I ask why a lot, and I ask a lot of questions of our guys. Because it's not what I believe; it's what they have to ultimately believe, and how they have to believe in themselves when they get in that box. So Vance Wilson says all the time, and he's right. Caught in the big leagues for a long time. He said the hardest walk in this game is from that on deck circle to home plate. Because everything you've done up until that point, you got to go do it. You know what I mean? And so,
right.
That's a process too. Like, I feel like that's some of the stuff that I've really gotten into with our mental performance side of the house is like, how can, what is a guy's process when they're walking up to the plate? Are they breathing? What, all the things that we don't think about, in the moment. But again, if you're really wanting to be good at this, you've got to be consistent with all of that as well. So.
Yeah, I do find it interesting sometimes when you watch guys hit and you realize, are they holding their breath? And like how that one little small thing affects how they feel at the plate. So I don't think it's everything, but I certainly think that's a component to, hey, you're a machine and you've got to figure out how to put yourself in the best position possible to go out there and let your body move how it wants to move. So yeah, I think, look, you said it earlier. I think we're constantly evolving and changing, trying to figure out how to keep making this thing work and keep having success down the road. So, buddy, this has been phenomenal. You brought up a lot of good insight. Is there anything else that you want to touch on that you think would be valuable for these guys to know that maybe I didn't bring up?
Well, I think it's just tough with the amateur stuff, Matt, just because, again, I'm living it right alongside a lot of these people. I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't use social media as a platform the way I probably should and whatnot. But my experience through all of this has been, you don't have to you don't have to go to 12 events a year and pay $12,000 to do all this stuff for your kids. I feel like I would invest in training. I would invest in, if someone has a cage and being able to use, from the hitting side specifically, like, you got to hit, like the younger players have got to hit and just be, understand it's a long play. You're not, at 12 years old, the best hitter at 12 years old, rarely, I mean, yeah, I get Bryce Harper, but rarely is that stud in your league at 12 years old is still the stud at 18, so just selling out to the process. Again, I'm going to keep using that word, but process of just every day I'm trying to get better, like you don't reach that peak as an amateur. You got to constantly be trying to just push that envelope and be consistent in your work. With all the information we have now, the science of, like, these kids, I think some of them are training like crazy a little bit, to be honest with you. I think, like, still want them to be kids. You still want them to be able to go out and have fun and do other things. But I worry about where we're going with all this. And I probably because my kids are going through it right now. Just because I think, again, I had a lot of fun when I was coaching those 3 years I was out of the game. I really loved working with those kids, and it wasn't going to these big events. They were playing games. They were playing baseball, it wasn't the showcase circuit, if you will. But I just feel like, man, if you love it and you want to really pursue this, you gotta be focused. You gotta really give it everything you got, because you don't get another chance. That's the hardest part about baseball for me, is that, I didn't know when my last game was my last game. And it's over. I can't go back. But coaching is kind of that way for me to continue, the love of the game. Not like golf or tennis or, other sports where you can keep playing after you're not a professional anymore. That's the hardest part about baseball. But like I said, man, you've been in this now. You've got some really good insight as well. And I think what you're doing here this is good. And people need to hear probably more of this than, I feel like they're probably being fed a lot of the information from the industry, if you will, that this is what your kids have to do. But I think it's going to be interesting here these next couple of years with the way the transfer portal's gone, with the rules changing. I've always believed too, with 11.7 scholarships, right? Is that still correct? Yeah.
That's
so
right.
Why wouldn't you be investing your money to save for college instead of trying to throw them in all these events and, hope to get a quarter of a scholarship somewhere?
Right.
That's the hardest part. You're trying to do what's best for your kids. I guess that's the bottom line for me, is like, I get it, man. Everybody's trying to do what's best for their kids, and who's directing it is the question,
right. Well, and again, it's just creating awareness and letting these families know. I mean, I've had parents who I've met over the years, and they tell me the horror stories of why they did what they did when their son was a freshman, and then they got to be a senior and they have $50,000 invested in their travel baseball journey. The kid doesn't get a scholarship, or at one point he had one, but then, the college dropped him and they leveraged their retirement account and all these things. And so it's, it's the impetus behind this. It's really wanting these families to just be educated and feel like I have way more insight than I otherwise would have. You said something interesting. You said, you have to go hit, you have to go train. What I say to parents is, unfortunately, the number one thing that I've realized they focus on is exposure. Mm-hmm. And what that really needs to be is development. Yeah. Right? Because if you develop, then naturally you can use the development and go compete. And through the competition and through your development, the exposure is a result of doing all those things really well. But if you aim for the exposure, you're going to be devoting so much time and energy and resources on something that is the kid even prepared for it at the moment. And if he's not, like, you're not going to convince you're not going to catch lightning in a bottle. A scout is going to watch you play so many times that if you're not ready, he's going to figure it out at some point. You're not going to confuse him into drafting you. Right. You're not going to confuse a college into giving you a scholarship if you're not ultimately prepared. So, we hear farm directors all the time talk about, hey, you got to go get at bats. You got to go get innings. You got to develop. It's just part of this game that you can't get away from. So why not focus on that at an early age and let the chips fall where they may. Have some faith, know that you put all the work in, and there are different things that you can do to put yourself in the best position. I get that, but it should start with the training and the development, not with the exposure.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm curious to see how things kind of continue to move in the travel baseball world over the next decade, because the way it looks today versus the way it looks 10 years ago is drastically different, and it's only getting more crazy.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just trying to do my part, man. I appreciate you obviously taking the time. It means so much. Love you like a brother.
Yeah, man.
You've been, I'm proud of your success. Look what you guys have done in Kansas City. It's been fun to watch. But thank you, man.
You got it. Anything for you, Matt. I appreciate it.